Today I have something very exciting I would like to share with you. It's an object I found in the Goodwill in the Upper East Side of Manhattan about 10 years ago today. It's clearly a replica of an ancient object, and this ancient object had two things that really made it stand out for me. First, at the bottom you can see there is cuneiform writing, which is the ancient writing of Mesopotamia. And then second, there are a number of beautiful images carved into the stone, and my hunch was that these might be gods, but I wasn't entirely sure because I didn't quite recognize many of them. So I wasn't sure what it was. I was able to find a good price for the object at Goodwill, and then lo and behold, here it is with me, and I'd like to share with you what this object is and why it is so important in the ancient world. A friend tipped me off that this is something called a kaduru. Kudurru means landmark or boundary. And I was able to determine that the original Kudurru, the one my replica is based on, is housed in the Great British Museum. It comes from Babylon in the year 1100 BCE, 3100 years ago. And the first column of text, what it says, I'll summarize it, is that there is a transfer of land in a region called the Sea Lands to a person named Gula. So it basically says this is the land and describes it in detail of Gula. Turning to the text on the back of the Kudurru, there is a severe warning. Let's begin with line 1. Whensoever in times to come, and here I'll summarize, somebody wants to do something bad to this deed, this Kudurru. In line 12 we read that if this person shall destroy landmark or boundary stone, or shall say the field was not presented or it was not measured, or in line 20, they shall take this stone up and he shall change it from his place, or shall cast it into the river, or shall hide it in the earth, or shall set it in a place where no man can see it. Meaning if somebody does something bad to this Kudurru or the many boundary markers that the Kudurru describes, then here comes the part with the deities. In line 23, may Anu, Enlil, Ea, and Ninmach, the great gods, curse him with an evil curse that cannot be loosened. May they tear out his foundation, and his seed may they snatch away. Basically, this person is going to die and he will have no offspring. So these are four gods, four deities. The first is Anu, the god of the heavens, and the second is Enlil, the god of fate and kingship. Anu and Enlil are represented on the Kudurru with two helmets, and both of these helmets are seated upon concentric rectangles, and these represent shrines or temples. So when the Kudurru says that Anu and Enlil will curse you, here is an image of Anu and Enlil. The third god was Ea, the god of wisdom, who dwells in the waters below, and he is represented by a turtle that can swim in these waters. The fourth deity is the goddess Ninmach, and she was the mother goddess, and it's not entirely clear which of the 17 images belongs to Ninmach, but perhaps it's the one right next to Ea. Let's continue with more gods. Column 3, line 2, may Sin, the great lord, with leprosy as with a garment, clothe his body, so that he may dwell by the wall of his city. Sin was the moon god, and he is represented on the Kudurru by a moon-shaped crescent at the top. There are two discs on both sides of the moon, representing the rest of the heavens. We have on the right-hand side a disc of a star emitting warmth with waves and light, and that is the sun spreading its warmth and light, and that god, his name is Shamash. He was the sun god in ancient Mesopotamia, and Shamash was the god of light, the god of sun, as well as the god of life and the god of justice. And by the way, the name for a sun in Hebrew and many Semitic languages is Shemesh. Shamash, Shemesh. Moving on to the left disc, what we see is an 8-sided star, and that represents Ishtar, who was the goddess of Venus, the morning and evening star, and the goddess of both love and warfare. So these are the three gods that we see in the heavens. Moving on, in line 6, may Nabu, the exalted sun, the establisher of the month and of the year, shorten his days so that he have no posterity. Nabu was the god of wisdom and especially writing in ancient Mesopotamia, and Nabu is represented on the Kudurru by a wedge-shaped object, which was most likely a stylus used for writing cuneiform. So since Nabu is in charge of writing, which means the calendar, he is also in charge of time, and whoever moves this Kudurru will have their lives and days cut short. Next we have column 3, line 10. May the lady Gula cause her burden of sickness to come upon him, so that while he lives, dark and bright blood he may pass like water. Gula was the deity of sickness and healing, and she is often represented by a dog. She is represented this way on our Kudurru. And so anybody who tampers with this Kudurru or moves any boundary stones, they are going to be cursed with sickness by Gula. At this point, the text actually breaks off, and we don't have all of the information we would like about the 17 images found on the Kudurru. I would just like to point out that Marduk, the great god of Babylon, is mentioned in the text, and he can be found on the Kudurru as a spade on top of a shrine. So Marduk is there. And although we don't have him in the text itself, I would like to point out to you my favorite image. It is of a fantastic snake that begins all the way at the bottom of the Kudurru and snakes its way up all the way towards the top. And this deity, this snake with all its scales, was Ishtaran, the god of justice. I find this Kudurru fascinating for so many reasons: the images, the deities, the text, but most importantly is that it sheds light on one way of life during the times of the Tanakh. According to the traditional chronology of the Tanakh, the period of Gula Eresh would have been at the same time as the judges, such as Samson and Deborah, the great leader. And it makes me wonder, what does the Tanakh have to say about boundary stones? So I'd like to show you 3 verses. The first one is Deuteronomy 19:14. Lo tasig gevul reacha asher govlu rishonim. Do not move the boundary of your neighbor, which the ancients marked. Another parallel can be found in Proverbs, which is Al taseg gevul olam asher asu avotecha. Do not move an ancient boundary which your fathers have made. Again, these are ancient boundaries. Do not change them. And the closest thing to our Kudurru is Deuteronomy 27:17. Arur masi gevul re'ehu va'amar kol ha'am Amin. Cursed be the one who moves the boundary of his neighbor, and all the people shall say Amen. Now the reason this verse is the most important, in my opinion, is because it actually has the verb arar, to curse. So we see the cursing that we saw in the Kudurru itself of the 17 gods coming down, and the cursing over here was probably just from the one god. And so on the one hand we have a very strong similarity that moving boundary stones leads to a curse from a god, but on the other hand they're very different. We have 17 here, all each with their own shrine and their own picture, whereas in the Tanakh God isn't even mentioned in this verse. It's just assumed that God would be the one who would bring about the curse. Parenthetically, if you know where to look, you can actually find boundary markers and even boundary stones in many places today. For example, this is a 110-year-old marker at the corner of my property. I also found these relatively ancient stones in Van Cortlandt Park, marking the boundary between New York City and the county just above it, Westchester County, specifically Yonkers. And to tie it all together, check out what I found on a website of my state, the New York State Association of Professional Land Surveyors. Quote, any person who knowingly damages, destroys, disturbs, removes, resets, or replaces any boundary marker placed on any tract of land by a licensed land surveyor. So far, this is almost exactly like what we read in the Kudurru of Gula Eresh, that if anybody moves this Kudurru or any of the boundary markers in any way, then what's going to happen? Let's continue with the land surveyors today. Quote, these people shall be punished by a civil fine of not more than $500 and shall be liable for the cost of reestablishment of said boundary marker. So, while in the Tanakh there was a curse for removing a boundary stone, and in the Kudurru there were 17 curses by 17 gods, here what we see is that, at least today in New York State, the punishment is a fine, a monetary fine. That's it. If you enjoyed this type of study, come learn Biblical Hebrew with me at the Institute of Biblical Culture, where we go from the Aleph-Bet to the entire book of Ruth in Hebrew, all in the matter of 10 months of dedicated study. Come, I'd love to see you there, and if not, I hope to see you for my next video.